This week on Quality Digest Live, breakthrough innovations from Georgia Tech.
Plus, we look at the real nature of competitive strategy. That and more when we come back.
This week's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is TÜV SÜD America. Take a minute to check out TÜV SÜD America's free QMS webinar series at www.tuvamerica.com/QMS webinars.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for April 6, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Well, it looks like the Baldrige Program is going to be just fine.
Yep.
Thank you very much. And if you remember, we reported a few months ago that the Baldrige Program was losing its federal funding as a result of budget cuts.
Yep.
Well, according to Harry Hertz, director of the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program, the Baldrige Program has a new self-sustaining business model based on income generation and supplemented with support from the Foundation for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, as well as some other non-operating income that they get on a continuing basis. So, new products and services will generate income and grow the customer base for the Baldrige Program and the Baldrige Enterprise. These services include training offerings, such as Baldrige training for international quality experts and others interested in the in-depth training currently offered to national Baldrige examiners. In addition, assessment services such as a fee-based alternative assessment now under development will provide the high quality of the Baldrige Award process, but without the award competition. Organizers that are currently not eligible for a Baldrige Award, such as recent recipients, are potential customers. This is kind of good news. This means that you can receive some of the value that comes from being a Baldrige participant and getting, site surveys and so forth. You can get some of that value without actually having to be that far along as you would normally as part of the regular Baldrige Baldrige participation process.
Exactly right.
So it's really good information. Other products and services are being planned as well. Remember when we talked to Harry Hertz several months ago, this was all kind of still in the offing. He was kind of saying, well, we think we can have some money coming in from other directions. We're going to offer some services. It now looks like they're in the process. Some of the stuff they've already rolled out, and there's other things that are still in the offing that looks like it'll make Baldrige self-supporting, which is what a lot of our readers said, it really should be going this direction.
It was interesting. We got comments on both sides of the fence on that when we covered the story a few months back. But many people did think, yes, that it should be a self-sustaining organization.
And certainly it's safer that way.
It is.
If you don't have to depend upon funding every year, you're going to be much more secure knowing that you've got your own income base. You don't have to worry about where you're going to get, several $1 million every year or not. So
absolutely good
makes
stuff.
Sense.
All right. Also in the news this week, an interesting study finds that pay incentives for hospitals do not repeat, improve patient outcomes. Very interesting. The study, which appeared in the New England Journal of Medicine recently, indicates that rewarding healthcare facilities for hitting key performance indicators or docking them if they fail to reach those marks has no effect either way on mortality rates for patients. Interesting. Incentive programs such as this one are an important part of the National Healthcare Overhaul Law that was recently rejected by the Supreme Court. Being debated right now, but it's actually been rejected by the Supreme Court. The 33 performance indicators mentioned in the study include elements such as providing recommended prescriptions and advising patients not to smoke. Hospitals that perform in the top 20%, according to these measures, can be eligible for up to 2% bonuses in Medicare payments, while those in the bottom 2% were liable to suffer up to a 2% penalty. Given the relatively small potential gains or penalties, it's perhaps not surprising that the program hasn't moved the needle in terms of improved outcomes for patients. It has been suggested that more substantial financial incentives may help ensure better outcomes, maybe not. But with the national program now in limbo, there may be no way of knowing what effect, if any, such a change would have. Now, for more information on the story, please click the article link just below the player right here.
So they're saying the whole carrot and the stick thing really isn't having an impact on patient out, or well, mortality. They specifically said mortality.
Mortality, right? And these are kind of simple things. Make sure people get the right prescriptions. Advising them not to smoke. Everybody should be doing this if you're a healthcare practitioner.
Yeah.
But the problem is the very teeny tiny, and 2% is actually the max. It's actually usually less. It's usually more like 1%. So 1% bonus, 1% docking, it doesn't really move it's not enough to do anything.
Well, where's the incentive there?
So there might be more incentive, but again, the program is in limbo. The national program is in limbo. So who the heck even knows what's going to be with this?
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to one of our first top stories. This one was a very interesting piece from Georgia Tech that we came across, which gives a brief breakdown of several innovative technologies that have come out of the university. We look at Georgia Tech and MIT and a lot of these universities because we get a lot of really cool stories out of them. This one was kind of a whole list of things that have come out of Georgia Tech recently. And I want to concentrate on a couple of them because, well, they're sort of pertinent to our audience, or at least they're interesting to me. So one of the most intriguing ones for me was a technology that could transform how industry creates complex metal parts through a process called lost wax investment casting. Very often you'll see very complex metal parts like turbines, engine turbines and so forth, done through this process. An ambitious project sponsored by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, otherwise known as DARPA. Suman Das, a professor in the George W. Woodruff School of Mechanical Engineering, has created an all-digital approach that automates how these part designs, these complex designs, are turned into the real thing. So, not surprising, it involves 3D printing. Hey, who'd have thought?
The watchword.
That's mine. Okay, investment casting right now involves a really complex process to create a ceramic mold that's then used to create the part. It's a 12-step process that uses hundreds of tooling pieces, a whole lot of manual labor. It's really costly, it's really low yield, and it typically produces more scrap than it produces finished product. But it's kind of the way these parts can be made right now. DAS's process is a lot more direct. What he does, he starts with a CAD drawing, just as you do with an investment, with the investment casting process. However, the ceramic molds are 3D printed. He calls this process large area maskless photopolymerization, or LAMP. Basically what he does, it uses a process, a 3D printing process, been around for a long time, uses a high resolution 3D UV laser that projects layer by layer each slice of a CAD model onto a mixture of photosensitive rosins and ceramic particles. And the layers are built up one by one. Now keep in mind, this is a rosin with ceramic particles. So after the mold is formed, it's baked at a high temperature, and the polymer is burned away, and the ceramic particles are sintered or melted, right? And so what you're left with is a ceramic mold, just as you would have gotten if you had done the investment casting process, except it's much quicker. According to Das, the LAMP process can cut the time to create a part from a CAD from several months to about a week, and it can produce parts out of a complexity that you couldn't even do with a standard investment casting process. So basically, an ability to create the mold, so you're still, from the mold part on, you're still going to do the same thing. You're still going to cast metal. It's the mold creation that he's really streamlined here. He claims that compared to investment casting, it can reduce costs by 25% and the number of unusable waste parts by 90%.
Wow. And
eliminate 100% of the tooling. No tooling involved because you're making the mold directly. Right. Okay, so he's currently working with turbine engine airfoils, one of the big markets for this, and he's working in collaboration with the University of Michigan, PCC Airfoils, and Honeywell International Inc. According to Georgia Tech, a prototype LAMP alpha machine is currently building 6 typical airfoil molds in 6 hours, and a larger beta machine is scheduled for installation at a PCC Airfoils facility in Ohio, and they say it's going to produce about 100 molds in 24 hours. So this is, if this really works, this is really going to revolutionize the whole mold making process. It's going to really drive down the cost and increase the ability of creating more complex parts.
Yeah.
So again, using our friends from 3D printing.
Wow.
Okay, another one. This one, I just throw this one in really quick. Well, first of all, do you know what one of the leading agricultural products is out of Georgia. In fact, Georgia is the leader in this agricultural product.
I'm going to guess peaches.
Chickens.
Chickens, okay, well,
Poultry.
there you go. There you
Lots
go.
of chickens, my friend.
Okay.
So it shouldn't surprise you that the Food Processing Technology Division of the Georgia Tech Research Institute does a lot of research in support of the state's $20 billion
Wow.
poultry industry. So their research into this from this particular department involves imaging and sensing technologies, robotics, automation systems, environmental biological systems, so on and so forth. I mean, a lot of different areas that go into the poultry business that this particular division of Georgia Tech's involved in. So according to the article, in one project, GTRI, that's the Research Institute, researchers are employing image processing, statistical modeling, modeling of biomaterials, and high-speed force control to bring automated chicken deboning
Wow.
to poultry processors. That's right, intelligent deboning systems.
That is great.
That's good.
That's going to save a lot of money.
That's going to save a lot of money. So initial tests of the prototype system, including cutting experiments, have shown the system's ability to recognize bone during the cut and thus avoid bone chips, because bone chips are kind of a big deal. There are some very major factors in play in this project, says Gary McMurray, Chief of Food Processing Technology Division and Project Director. These include food safety, because bone chips are a major hazard, particularly in breast fillets.
Sure.
Right? You're getting a fillet, you're expecting it to be meat and
Nothing but.
nothing but. So this whole story kind of brought to mind, I don't know if you remember this. Remember the very first TechnorazziLIVE we did at Faro?
Yes.
With
Sure.
Michelle?
Yep.
We used a laser scanner.
Yep, we did.
I don't know whether this got on camera or not, but off camera, I was asking Michelle, so what's the craziest thing you've ever scanned? It was a chicken.
I kind of remember that, yes.
It was a chicken. And I'm thinking, if that poor chicken only knew what was coming. It's like, you're scanning me, I see that red stripe, I'm sorry, the next thing is going to be automated deboning, and I'm just like,
McNugget.
McNuggets, baby.
McNuggets,
That's
here I
out of
come.
there. So there you go, automation for chicken deboning. I just thought that was
That's great.
Just
That's great. Well,
those
that's-
folks in Georgia Tech, you know?
That's one of those things. You know, that's a great application. No bones about it.
No bones.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
really
that's-
that's really bad.
That's
I really have to stop saying things like that. All right. Well, thanks, Dirk. Another.
Yeah, sure, my pleasure.
All right. Another story we had this week comes from a frequent columnist of ours by the name of Stuart Anderson, and it appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. The name of the piece: Understanding Competitive Strategy. Competitive strategy, rather misunderstood term, according to Stuart,
Right.
and he's going to talk about it a little bit. Now, Stuart, of course, is a frequent contributor of ours, and he is always brings a very clear and practical eye to questions of operational efficiency. And this article, certainly no different. And it's more than that, it's beautifully stated. Very clearly, beautifully stated argument here, and one that's very compelling. Now, first of all, a definition here. To Anderson and Michael Porter, who is the economist who he quotes throughout this, he refers to a book called Understanding Michael Porter.
Right.
And Porter is an economist.
Actually, Understanding Michael Porter, written by Joan
Written
Magretta.
by Joan Magretta.
Yeah.
But Understanding Michael Porter, and Michael Porter is the guy who he's referring to
Right.
throughout this piece, talking about competitive advantage, competitive strategy. So first of all, definition. For Anderson and for Porter, business strategy is simply applied microeconomics by another name. It's just basically it's an economic thing. It's not really products and services, it's cost and profit is really what it boils down to, right? Another clarifying point that he gets to right at the beginning of the piece. Competitive advantage doesn't mean something that your firm happens to be good at. It's not, that's how it's interpreted many times, that's not really what it means. It also doesn't mean that you do the same thing as other suppliers in your space, only a little bit better. Now, for Porter and for Anderson, competitive advantage is something that allows an organization to get a leg up on its rivals. In other words, that's in terms of price or cost. So increased profits then are going to flow naturally from that. So it's all about, again, driving down the cost to supply something, or hopefully being able to price it accordingly so you can have a very fine profit. Sure. That's how companies succeed. That's how companies achieve competitive advantage. Now, the article also nicely defines the theoretical world of the so-called perfect competition, which doesn't really exist in the real world, although in some cases it's pretty darn close. Perfect competition is where all the products and services in a given industry or market are exactly the same, right? In that scenario now, pretty much everyone is an order taker, every product and service is a commodity, and no one can set the market prices except for who? The customer.
The customer, right.
It's not who you want setting the market prices really necessarily. It's not really a good place to be in from a competitive advantage. So instead of trying to assume this competitive advantage that really doesn't exist by just doing what everybody else is doing better, the better way to do it, according to Anderson and according to Porter, is to be a differentiator. We talk about differentiation all the time. But truly to differentiate yourself and not do what everybody else is doing, not follow the crowd, but create something new, create something fresh that allows you to do what? Set the market. That's the key thing. You want to be able to, as a firm, set the market price for your very unique product or service that differentiates yourself from the competition.
But is this really a new idea? I mean,
it's not, but again, it's simply stated, it's very clearly stated by Anderson here that many companies misunderstand what competitive advantage means. They say, well, we're better than our competitors because they do this and they do X, we do X times Y and it's 10% better. But it's the same thing. It's not really anything different. You're both selling widgets, you're both selling a service. And ultimately that's going to commoditize whatever it is, whatever market that you're in. And again, that's not what you want to do. That's not how you build a competitive advantage. And key, most importantly, set the market price. If you want to succeed, you've got to set the market price based on your lowest possible costs and your highest possible charge price that you can pay people for that. Now, this argument that Stuart puts out here, and that I haven't read Michael Porter's book, so I can't comment on the book, but he's parroting Michael Porter's book here, so I think Porter's argument is along these lines too. Really, it resonates with me because we are in a very highly competitive market. All media is. I mean, we produce content. And we, our major thing is selling ads to that content.
And so does everybody else.
For our marketing department. So does everybody else. So we've had to struggle with this, and certainly in our print days when we were struggling with it, it was definitely even more of a prevalent thing now. We ourselves had to look at what are the competitive advantages that we have, not things we can do better, not that we can make the ads we sell prettier or put a nice border around it.
Well, innovation then.
Innovation. This show is for us is an example of that. It's something that wasn't really being done in the market, and it's had a lot of success for us. It's helped us reach a lot of people that we weren't reaching before, right? So that is the lesson, the moral here, and you're right, it's nothing that's really particularly new, but the moral and what Anderson's hammering away out here is, if you're reading the article, understand what competitive advantage really means. Don't misunderstand it as meaning that it's basically a race to the bottom, that you're going to just do the same thing everybody else is doing a little bit better for a little cheaper. You're never going to win that way.
You know what this story reminds me of? Last week, we covered a story from the conference board, which was comparing concerns of
CEOs,
CEOs of mature companies, which tended to be
North American or
European, versus Asian companies, and it was exactly that. The Asian companies know this. I mean, they're all about the whole, according to the conference board study, they're all about this innovation and getting out there, whereas the Western mature companies are all about staying up with the Joneses, avoiding risk, making sure that you're on a competitive level with your other competitors. Whereas the other, they're just all, the emerging markets, they're all about just getting out there.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of ties into the same mindset.
It's something that North American and European managers and firms need to understand, is need to embed that risk taking, that idea that you're only going to break a market and break out of a market and break into new markets by doing very different things and thinking very aggressively, very radically about what it is you're doing and what core competencies really are. So
interesting.
Good. I love these kind of articles because they're very applicable to everybody out there, and it's just they're
really common sense too when you think about it, but you just get into a mindset and you get and I mean, everybody worries about competition. It's like, oh man, what's the competition doing? So, oh man, we better be sure we do the same thing because we don't want them to get ahead of it. You don't want to do the same thing. You want to do something just completely off the wall.
So again, that's Stuart Anderson's article. Again, it was Understanding Competitive Strategy that appeared earlier this week in Quality Digest. So check out the link below the player.
There you go.
All right, we're going to move on now to a very interesting tech corner. This is a good one. I really enjoy this one. Mitutoyo recently announced, and we covered it in our newsletter, that they've come out with the world's very first 0.1 micron resolution micrometer. Very cool stuff. Oh, you're gearing up. Okay, it's good stuff.
Are you worried?
No, not yet, but I am now. This,
Don't
my
worry,
friends,
it only lasts 8 minutes.
oh boy. This, my friends, regardless of what Dirk is talking about, I don't know what he's talking about. This Tech Corner, this is a very, very interesting piece of equipment that we're going to show you here. And we're fortunate enough to have one of Mitutoyo's brand new micrometers with us today. And Dirk is going to demo it for us. He's going to gear up, demo it for us. So Dirk, take it away. And
you're probably wondering why I'm putting
that.
these gloves on. If you remember our series of videos we did with Craig Howell at CPM Labs, when you're dealing with something like gauge blocks, which we are going to have here on the set in just a little bit, you got to make sure you don't get oil on them. You got to make sure they're precision instruments, and so you really want, even in this setting, we really want to handle our gauge blocks with gloved hands. So I don't want to get oil all over the gauge blocks that Craig Howell from CPM Labs has contributed to us. So we're going to get into demoing the new Mitutoyo gauge.
Let's see it.
Let me grab it. Okay. So, like Mike said, what we have here, courtesy of Mitutoyo, is a brand new micrometer from Mitutoyo. You may be going, gee whiz, great, another micrometer, they're a dime a dozen. But as Mike pointed out, this one is actually, according to Mitutoyo, the only 0.1 micron, 5 micro-inch handheld micrometer in the world. Brand new, out from Mitutoyo, and we're one of the first ones to get one. Let's take a closer look at this. Let me bring one to compare it to. What I'm setting up here right now, this is another micrometer, an older micrometer loaned to us by Craig Howell. This is probably a lot of you have one of these or a different brand. This happens to be a Mitutoyo, but you may have a different brand. 50 millionths micrometer. That is, sorry, I was blocking that there. That's the 50 millionths micrometer. And here is the brand new one from Mitutoyo. This is a 5 millionths micrometer. You'll notice the controls are the same as what you're used to. We've got our mode for inches or metric. We're going to leave it in inches. Your set button or 0 button, and your hold button, which also functions as the on-off button on this particular product. So let's talk a little bit about resolution versus accuracy. On our older micrometer here, this particular model has got a 50 millionths resolution and a 50 millionths guaranteed accuracy. This one has a 5 millionths resolution, but a 20 millionths guaranteed accuracy. That's not unusual when you start getting into higher precision instruments like this, where the resolution and the accuracy are going to be different. Typically, the accuracy will be higher than the resolution, or a larger number, I should say. Okay, this particular model I have in my hand, this particular micrometer, according to the calibration sticker, has a measurement uncertainty of plus or minus 14 microinches. So basically 2.5 to 3 times more accurate than this device here. Let's do a little experiment and show you what all this accuracy actually means. So the first test I want to do, this is a gauge plug supplied to us by Craig. I'm going to compare the middle dimension, the middle diameter of this gauge plug to the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is zero this on the center. So I've got this in here. Let me ring it a little bit. And, sorry, slip that a little bit. Okay, we're showing 0. It's already 0 because I've already been playing with this. Not quite. Let's zero that out. And let's double check. And now we're at 0. Now let's go to the end. So we go to the end, and we see we're still showing 0 at the end of this. Now, so according to this 50 millionths micrometer, there is no difference between the middle of that gauge plug and the end of that gauge plug. But I happen to know that this is a used gauge plug. And you probably know where I'm going with this. If that's a used gauge plug, then there is no way that the end of that gauge plug is the same dimension as the middle, because the end is what gets worn. So we couldn't detect it with the 50 millionths micrometer. Let's take a look at it with this 5 millionths micrometer. We're going to do the same experiment all over again. I'm going to put this into the middle here, and we're going to zero it. And let's double check. Not quite there. Let's do that again. Back it off. Let's ring it in a little bit. There we go. Now we've got our 0. Okay, definitely at 0. Now we're going to go to the end. We go to the end. Remember, on our 50 millionths, we did not see a difference between the middle and the end. On this one, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's a minus sign there. We're showing minus 30 millionths of an inch. I've done this experiment on this gauge plug probably 24 times, and I will tell you that I get this same number every single time, between minus 30 and minus 35 millionths of an inch difference, which is what we would expect. We would expect there to be a difference between the middle and the end on an old gauge plug because the end's getting worn. One last experiment here. Let's go back to the middle. Remember, the middle was zeroed. We go back in there. Let's just make sure we're still zeroed. And we are. Great. Now, I'm going to take this, and let's go back to our camera here. I'm going to hold this in my hand. Now, you normally wouldn't do this. You all know better than to do this because we all know the physics of thermal expansion. However, this is just going to speed up a process which could happen anyway, and actually has happened to me while using this particular micrometer. With your older 50 millionths micrometer, a little bit of temperature, putting a little bit of temperature, a little bit of heat onto your gauge plug, even for a short period of time, you would not have detected it with your 50 millionths micrometer. It wouldn't have shown up. But I will tell you that playing with this, this brand new one from Mitutoyo, it does not take much time handling your gauge block or your gauge plug or whatever to put enough of a temperature expansion onto the part for it to actually show up on the micrometer. Now, this is actually something gross. You wouldn't really do this, but it will show you the sensitivity of this micrometer. So this has been about 30 seconds. So remember, we were zeroed. We're going to come back to the center of our gauge plug, and I get the same number every single time because I've been practicing this. If I hold this in my hand for 30, 45 seconds, I will see reliably a 30 micro-inch expansion, 30 micro-inch growth, between 30 and 35 growth in this gauge plug. Really showing you that you have to be, when you have an instrument of this sensitivity, you really do have to be much more careful with how you're handling. I'll come back to this camera here. You have to be much more careful of how you're handling not only your micrometer, because the micrometer itself can be influenced by temperature, but also any device that you're measuring, because now you really have the sensitivity at your fingertips in a handheld micrometer to measure things that you've never measured before. So once again, this is the new high accuracy Digimatic micrometer, Absolute, from Mitutoyo. Thanks to Mitutoyo for loaning this, and actually also thanks to Craig Howell of CPM Labs for loaning us some extra equipment so we can show a couple of experiments to you. Very, very interesting. Yep. 0.1 micron.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Amazing, incredible.
We're really glad they were able to send this to us.
Yes,
so.
thank you, Mitutoyo, for sending that to us. It's really, really much appreciated for letting us send that over, and check it out on a very interesting Tech Corner this week.
Yep.
All right, well, that's our show for the week, but before we close, I'd like to offer one more thank you to our sponsor, TÜV SÜD. Find out all you need to know about how a quality management system can benefit your business. TÜV SÜD's webinar series covers a variety of topics for ISO 9001, ISO 14001, OSIS 18001, ISO 50001, R2, TL 9000, AS 9100, ISO 13485, food safety and supplier auditing. Wow! That is a lot of great content from TÜV SÜD. Find out more by visiting online at www.tuvamerica.com/QMS webinars to check out 25 plus webinars from industry experts. You can also click on the banner ad just below, or if you're watching on demand later, just to the right of the player right here. So check that out.
Okay, and we also want to remind you that this coming week,
nope. Wow.
We're done. Was it good for you? In just a few days, actually, we'll be bringing you the next episode of TechnorazziLIVE. We're broadcasting the show from Hexagon Metrology's North American headquarters in North Kingstown, Rhode Island. The action starts at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on April 12th. We'll be demoing Hexagon's newest product, a shop floor CMM with some amazing functionality.
Yes.
Register right now here below the player to check it out.
Yep. And we'll be there. Yeah,
and we'll be there. Yeah.
And we're going to be there the next day as well. We're going to be presenting a special episode of QDL from Hexagon's offices on Friday, April 13th. And this show is going to have some really unique guests and some great features. So tune in next Friday. Gosh, next Friday, yeah. And join us then and there.
So there you go. Thanks again, once again. Thanks you, How many times? Once again and
A
again.
lot of thank yous. We love you all. Thank you for being with us.
Thank each and every one of you.
So have a great weekend.
So long.
Bye.
Thank you.